Captain Sarah Chin gripped the stick of her A-10 Thunderbolt II, better known as the Warthog, as she banked left over the desert landscape of Afghanistan. The familiar rumble of the twin engines filled her ears through her helmet, a sound that had become as comforting as a lullaby over her 3 deployments. At 28, she was one of the youngest A-10 pilots in the squadron, but her record spoke for itself. 57 combat missions, 0 friendly fire incidents, and a reputation for precision that had earned her the callsign Surgeon. The radio crackled to life in her headset. "Surgeon, this is Overlord. We have urgent tasking for you. Grid 41 SMD 12345 67890. Troops in contact, immediate CAS required." Sarah's hands moved automatically across her controls, inputting the coordinates into her targeting system. Close air support missions were what the A-10 was built for, and what she lived for. Down below, American soldiers were counting on her to keep them alive. She could see the dust clouds in the distance where the firefight was raging. "Overlord, Surgeon copies. En route to target area. ETA 3 minutes. As she approached the coordinates, Sarah could make out the chaos below. Muzzle flashes sparked from a compound surrounded by mud walls, while friendly forces were pinned down behind a low ridge about 400 meters away. The enemy had chosen their position well, with clear fields of fire and good cover. It was going to be a challenging engagement. "Surgeon, this is Warrior 6 on the ground. We've got about 15 Taliban fighters in that compound. They've got us pretty good here. Can you help us out?" Sarah studied the target through her targeting pod, noting the positions of both friendly and enemy forces. The compound was close to the friendlies, but not impossibly so. She had made tighter shots before. "Warrior 6, I can see your position. Confirm you are behind the ridge to the south of the compound?" "That's affirmative. We're about 400 meters south of the target building." Sarah lined up for her first pass, bringing the nose of the Warthog around to point at the compound. She could see figures moving between the buildings, and her targeting system painted the scene in crisp detail. This was what she had trained for, what she was good at. The soldiers below were depending on her precision. Just as she was about to squeeze the trigger, a new voice cut across the radio frequency. all aircraft, this is Falcon 1. We have F-16s inbound to your location for immediate strike." Sarah frowned. F-16s? She was already on station, already lined up for the shot. Why were they sending fast movers when she was perfectly positioned to handle the mission? "Overlord, Surgeon is already on station and ready to engage. Why are we bringing in F-16s? There was a pause before Overlord responded. "Surgeon, you are directed to hold off on engagement. F-16s will handle this mission." The confusion in Sarah's voice was evident even through the radio static. "Overlord, I'm in perfect position here. The A-10 is designed for this exact mission. These F-16s will have to make multiple passes, and they don't have the loiter time I do. Surgeon, stand down. That's an order." Sarah felt her jaw clench. She had been flying CAS missions for 3 years, and she knew her aircraft's capabilities better than anyone. The A-10 was built specifically for close air support. Its 30mm cannon could precisely engage targets without the massive collateral damage that F-16 bombs might cause. She could stay on station for hours if needed, providing ongoing support to the troops below. The F-16s would drop their ordnance and have to return to base to rearm. But orders were orders. She pulled her aircraft into a holding pattern, watching as 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons screamed overhead at much higher altitude. Through her radio, she could hear the ground controller trying to talk the F-16 pilots onto the target. "Falcon 1, target is the large compounded Grid 41 SMD 12345 67890. Friendlies are 400 meters to the south behind a ridge." "Copy that. We're having trouble seeing the target through this haze. Can you mark it with smoke?" Sarah shook her head. She could see the target perfectly clearly through her targeting pod. The A-10 systems were designed for this kind of close-in work, with sensors optimized for low-altitude operations. The F-16s were trying to identify targets from 20,000 feet while traveling at hundreds of miles per hour. The first F-16 made its pass, dropping a 500-pound bomb that hit the compound but also destroyed 2 adjacent buildings that hadn't been part of the target. Sarah winced as she watched the explosion through her targeting system. Effective, but not precise. If there had been civilians in those buildings. Good hit, Falcon 1, came the call from the ground controller, though Sarah could hear the strain in his voice. Most of the enemy fire has stopped, but we're still taking some shots from the eastern building. The second F-16 came around for another pass, but by now the dust and smoke from the first bomb had obscured much of the target area. Sarah could still see movement through her infrared targeting system, but she knew the F-16 pilots were flying nearly blind. "I'm having trouble acquiring the target," called Falcon 2. "Too much smoke and debris." This was exactly what Sarah had been afraid of. The F-16s had done their job, but now the situation was more complicated. There were still active enemy positions, but the high explosive bombs had created a confusing tangle of rubble and smoke. The precision cannon of her A-10 would be perfect for picking off the remaining threats without causing further destruction. Overlord, Surgeon requests permission to engage remaining targets with 30mm cannon. I can see enemy positions that the F-16s can't engage safely. Another pause. Negative, Surgeon. RTB immediately. Return to base? Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. There were still American soldiers in contact with the enemy, and she had the perfect tool for the job, but she was being ordered to leave the area. Overlord, I can clean up these remaining positions without any collateral damage. The F-16s have done good work, but there are still active threats down there. Surgeon, you will RTB immediately. This is not a request. The tone in the controller's voice was final. Sarah felt a sick feeling in her stomach as she turned her aircraft toward home base. She could hear the continuing radio chatter between the F-16s and the ground controller as they tried to coordinate additional strikes on the remaining enemy positions. What should have been a clean, precise engagement was turning into a prolonged operation. As she flew back toward base, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had been flying combat missions for 3 years, and she had never been pulled off a CAS mission when she was in perfect position to help troops in contact. The A-10 was specifically designed for this kind of work. Its cannon could precisely engage individual targets without the massive explosions that F-16 bombs produced. It could loiter over the battlefield for hours, providing ongoing support. It was the perfect tool for the job, and yet she had been ordered to stand down. The flight back to Bagram Airfield gave her time to think, but the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. The military was usually very logical about asset allocation. You used the right tool for the right job. Sending F-16s to do CAS work when an A-10 was already on station was like using a sledgehammer when you needed a scalpel. When she landed and shut down her engines, Sarah's crew chief, Technical Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, was waiting for her as usual. Rodriguez had been working on A-10s for 12 years, and he knew the aircraft better than most pilots. He also had an uncanny ability to read his pilots' moods. "How'd it go up there, Captain?" he asked as he helped her out of the cockpit. Sarah pulled off her helmet and ran her hand through her sweat-dampened hair. "Strange one, Rodriguez. Got pulled off a CAS mission for no good reason I can figure out." Rodriguez frowned. "That's not like them. A-10s are the best platform for CAS. What did they send instead?" F-16s. The crew chief's frown deepened. F-16s for close air support? That's like using a race car to plow a field. Sure, it'll work, but it's not what it's designed for. Sarah nodded. That was exactly how she felt about it. She had been flying the A-10 long enough to know its strengths and limitations. In a close air support role, especially with friendlies nearby, there was no better aircraft in the Air Force inventory. The 30mm cannon could put rounds precisely where they needed to go without the massive blast radius of bombs. The aircraft could fly low and slow, giving the pilot time to identify targets and coordinate with troops on the ground. And it could stay on station for hours if needed. As she walked toward the squadron building for her mission debrief, Sarah's mind kept returning to the radio call that had started the whole strange sequence of events. The voice that had announced the incoming F-16s had been different from the usual controller. More formal, more distant. And the order to RTB had been unusually abrupt. The debrief room was small and windowless, with a long table and several chairs arranged around it. Major Tom Harrison, the squadron operations officer, was waiting for her with a clipboard and an expression she couldn't quite read. "Take a seat, Sarah," he said, using her first name instead of her call sign. That was unusual. In the squadron, everyone went by call signs during official business. Sarah sat down across from him, setting her helmet on the table. "Sir, I have to ask about what happened out there today. I was in perfect position for that CAS mission, and I got pulled off for no apparent reason." Major Harrison was quiet for a moment, studying the papers on his clipboard. Finally, he looked up at her. "Sarah, I need to ask you about your aircraft's tail number." The question caught her completely off guard. "My tail number?" "Sir, it's 78-0651. Same as always." "Why? When was the last time you looked at your tail?" Sarah stared at him. "Sir, I don't understand. I pre-flight my aircraft before every mission. The tail number is 78-0651, just like it says on my aircraft assignment sheet." Major Harrison reached into his folder and pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table to her. It was a picture of her A-10, taken from behind and above, clearly showing the tail. But the number painted there wasn't 78-0651. It was 75-0289. Sarah picked up the photograph, studying it closely. It was definitely her aircraft. She could tell by the specific pattern of wear marks on the fuselage and the small dent near the left engine that she knew from her daily inspections. But the tail number was completely different. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "This has to be a mistake. My aircraft is 78-0651. Major Harrison was watching her carefully. "Sarah, when did you last physically look at your tail number? Actually walk around behind your aircraft and read the numbers painted there?" Sarah tried to remember. She always did a thorough pre-flight inspection, walking around the entire aircraft, checking control surfaces, looking for leaks or damage. But the tail was usually the last thing she checked, and by then, she was usually focused on getting airborne for her mission. She realized with a growing sense of unease that she couldn't remember the last time she had actually looked at the numbers on her tail. I'm not sure," she admitted. "But my crew chief would have noticed if something was wrong." "Your crew chief has been on leave for the past week. Sergeant Martinez has been handling your aircraft." Sarah felt her world starting to tilt. Rodriguez had been her crew chief for her entire deployment. She saw him before and after every mission. But now that she thought about it, she hadn't seen him in several days. The man who had helped her out of her cockpit today had been different, younger, someone she didn't recognize. "Major, what's going on here? What's special about tail number 75-0289? Major Harrison closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "That's what we're trying to figure out, Captain. That aircraft was supposed to have been retired from service 2 years ago." The silence in the debrief room stretched on as Sarah stared at the photograph. Her mind raced through the implications of what Major Harrison had just told her. An aircraft that was supposed to have been retired 2 years ago? How was that possible? "Sir, I need to see my aircraft," she said, standing up from the table. "I need to see this tail number for myself." Major Harrison nodded. "I figured you would. Let's take a walk." They left the squadron building and walked across the tarmac toward the aircraft parking area. The afternoon sun was brutal, and heat waves shimmered up from the concrete. In the distance, Sarah could see her A-10 parked in its usual spot, looking exactly as it always did. The twin engines, the distinctive straight wings, the armored cockpit tub that had saved so many pilots' lives over the years. As they approached the aircraft, Sarah felt a growing sense of dread. From the front and sides, everything looked normal. But when they walked around to the back of the aircraft, there it was, painted in large white numbers on the vertical stabilizer, 75-0289. Sarah reached out and touched the numbers, half expecting them to be freshly painted or somehow fake. But the paint was weathered and worn, exactly like the rest of the aircraft. This wasn't a recent change. These numbers had been on this aircraft for a long time. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "How is this possible? I've been flying this aircraft for 6 months. How could I not notice that the tail number was different?" Major Harrison was studying her reaction carefully. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Sarah, I need you to think carefully. Has anything unusual happened during your flights? Any equipment malfunctions, any strange radio calls, anything at all out of the ordinary?" Sarah thought back over her recent missions. Everything had seemed normal. The aircraft performed exactly as she expected. All the systems worked properly. Her weapons had functioned perfectly. There had been nothing to suggest that anything was wrong. But, then, she remembered something from her mission today. The voice on the radio that had called in the F-16s. It had been different somehow. More formal, more distant. And, the insistence on pulling her off the mission when she was in perfect position to help. Today's mission, she said slowly. The way I got pulled off that CAS mission. It was unusual. I've never been ordered to RTB when troops were still in contact. Tell me about that radio call. The one that brought in the F-16s. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to remember the exact words. The call sign was Falcon 1. They announced that F-16s were inbound for immediate strike. But, there was something about the voice. It didn't sound like our usual controllers. Major Harrison made a note on his clipboard. What did the voice sound like? Older, maybe. More formal. Like someone reading from a script rather than a controller who was actively managing the situation. They stood in silence for a moment, both staring at the tail number. Finally, Major Harrison spoke again. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something that doesn't leave this conversation. Aircraft 75-0289 was involved in an incident 2 years ago. A friendly fire incident that killed 4 American soldiers. Sarah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. Friendly fire was every CAS pilot's worst nightmare. The idea that she might have been flying an aircraft with that kind of history made her sick. What happened? She asked quietly. The pilot was a Captain Lisa Morgan. Experienced A-10 driver, good record, no previous incidents. She was providing CAS for a patrol that had gotten ambushed. But, something went wrong with the targeting systems. The coordinates got mixed up somehow, and she fired on the wrong position. Sarah's hands were shaking. How did the coordinates get mixed up? That was never fully explained. Captain Morgan insisted that her targeting system had shown the correct coordinates, but the investigation found that she had fired on a position that was clearly marked as friendly. The aircraft was immediately grounded and scheduled for retirement. What happened to Captain Morgan? Major Harrison's expression darkened. She couldn't live with what had happened. 3 weeks after the incident, she took her service weapon and... He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She couldn't imagine the guilt and anguish that Captain Morgan must have felt. To know that you had killed your own people, even by accident, would be unbearable. But, sir, if the aircraft was retired, how is it here? How have I been flying it? That's what we're trying to figure out. According to all the official records, this aircraft should have been scrapped at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona. But, somehow it ended up here, with a different tail number in the system. Sarah looked at the aircraft again, trying to see it differently now. Was there something sinister about it? Some sign that it carried the weight of tragedy? But, it looked exactly like every other A-10 she had ever seen. Just aluminum and steel and wires, nothing more. There's something else, Major Harrison said quietly. We've been tracking your mission history since you started flying this aircraft. Every single one of your CAS missions has been unusually precise. 0 friendly fire incidents, 0 collateral damage, minimal civilian casualties. Your targeting accuracy has been extraordinary. Sarah frowned. That's what we're trained for. That's what the A-10 is designed for. Yes, but your record is statistically unusual. Other A-10 pilots have good records, but yours is almost perfect. It's like the aircraft is helping you avoid the kind of mistakes that other pilots sometimes make. The idea was ridiculous, Sarah knew. Aircraft were machines. They didn't have consciousness or memory or the ability to help their pilots. But, as she stood there looking at 75-0289, she couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. Major, are you suggesting that this aircraft is somehow haunted? Major Harrison shrugged. I'm a practical man, Sarah. I don't believe in ghosts. But, I do believe in facts, and the facts about this situation don't add up. An aircraft that should have been scrapped is somehow still in service. A pilot who died is somehow still affecting targeting accuracy. And, today, you got pulled off a mission by someone who shouldn't have had the authority to do it. They started walking back toward the squadron building, leaving the mysterious aircraft behind. Sarah's mind was reeling with questions. How long had she been flying 75-0289? Who had authorized its continued use? And who had given the order today to pull her off that mission? Sir, I need to know more about Captain Morgan. What was she like as a pilot? From what I've read in her file, she was a lot like you. Young, dedicated, very precise in her targeting. She had completed 43 combat missions without a single incident before the friendly fire event. What was her call sign? Major Harrison stopped walking and turned to look at her. Surgeon. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. That's my call sign. I know. That's another piece of this puzzle that doesn't make sense. Call signs are usually unique within a squadron, especially when they're based on specific characteristics like precision targeting. The fact that you ended up with the same call sign as Captain Morgan is unusual. They had reached the squadron building, but Sarah wasn't ready to go inside yet. She needed time to process what she had learned. She needed to understand how she had become connected to an aircraft and a pilot who had died in tragedy. Major, I want to request a different aircraft. I don't want to fly 75-0289 anymore. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. We're still investigating how this aircraft ended up in our inventory, and we need to monitor its performance. Until we understand what's happening, you're the only pilot who's been assigned to it. Sarah felt trapped. She was being asked to continue flying an aircraft with a tragic history, an aircraft that somehow seemed to be connected to events she didn't understand. What if the same thing happens to me that happened to Captain Morgan? What if something goes wrong with the targeting systems? That's why we're watching so closely. Sarah, your record with this aircraft has been exemplary. Whatever happened 2 years ago, it doesn't seem to be happening now. If anything, this aircraft seems to be performing better than normal. As they walked into the building, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The friendly fire incident, the retired aircraft that wasn't really retired, the duplicate call signs, there had to be a connection that made sense of it all. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters trying to research Captain Lisa Morgan. The military's computer network had limited information available, but she was able to find some basic biographical data. Morgan had been 26 when she died, just 2 years younger than Sarah was now. She had grown up in Colorado, graduated from the Air Force Academy, and specialized in close air support from early in her career. But what struck Sarah most was a photograph she found in an old squadron newsletter. Captain Lisa Morgan looked remarkably similar to Sarah herself. Same height, same build, same dark hair. They could have been sisters. Sarah closed the laptop and lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Too many coincidences. Too many connections that didn't make sense. She was starting to feel like she was caught in some kind of elaborate setup, but she couldn't figure out who was behind it or what they wanted. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. The truth is in the maintenance logs. Check Hangar 7 after midnight. Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Someone was reaching out to her, someone who knew about the situation with her aircraft. But who? And why the secrecy? She looked at the clock. It was 10:30 p.m. In an hour and a half, she would have to decide whether to trust this mysterious contact or ignore the message and try to get some sleep. But she knew she wouldn't be able to sleep. Not with so many questions unanswered. Not when she felt like she was flying an aircraft that carried the ghost of another pilot. At 11:45 p.m., Sarah pulled on her uniform and quietly left her quarters. Hangar 7 was on the far side of the base, away from the main flight line. It was used primarily for maintenance and storage, and it should be empty at this time of night. The walk across the base was eerie in the darkness. Most of the aircraft were secured for the night, and there was very little activity. Sarah's footsteps echoed off the concrete as she made her way toward the distant hangar. When she reached Hangar 7, the large doors were closed but not locked. She slipped inside and found herself in a cavernous space filled with aircraft parts, maintenance equipment, and filing cabinets. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate safely. Captain Chen? Sarah spun around to find a figure emerging from the shadows. It was an older man in Air Force maintenance coveralls, someone she didn't recognize. "Who are you?" she asked. "Master Sergeant Bill Thompson. I've been working on A-10s for 22 years. I was here when Captain Morgan was killed." Sarah studied his face in the dim light. He looked tired and worried, like a man carrying a heavy burden. "You sent me the text message?" "I did. Because I think you deserve to know the truth about what happened to that aircraft, and what's been happening to you." Master Sergeant Thompson led Sarah deeper into the hangar, past rows of covered equipment and stacked aircraft parts. In the back corner, he stopped at a desk covered with thick maintenance logbooks and manila folders. "Captain, before I show you what I found, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you could end both our careers. But I can't keep quiet about it anymore, especially after what happened to you today." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "What do you mean, what happened to me today?" Thompson opened one of the thick logbooks and pointed to an entry dated 6 months ago. "This is when your aircraft, tail number 75-0289, was supposedly retired and sent to the boneyard. But look at this." He flipped through several pages, showing entry after entry of maintenance work performed on the aircraft. Oil changes, tire replacements, avionics updates, all dated after the aircraft was supposed to have been scrapped. "Someone has been maintaining this aircraft in secret," Thompson continued. "Not just basic maintenance, but advanced modifications. Look at this entry from 3 months ago." Sarah studied the maintenance record he was pointing to. It described the installation of a new targeting system component, something called a Neural Interface Processing Unit. She had never heard of such a thing. "What's a Neural Interface Processing Unit?" she asked. Thompson's expression grew dark. "That's where things get really strange, Captain. According to this work order, it was installed by a team from a company called Synaptic Dynamics. But when I tried to research that company, I couldn't find any record of it existing." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that someone has been experimenting with your aircraft, Captain. And I think they've been experimenting with you too." Thompson opened another folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "These are copies of all your mission reports since you started flying 75-0289. I've analyzed every one of them, and the pattern is clear. Your targeting accuracy isn't just good, it's superhuman." He spread several mission reports across the desk, pointing to specific entries. "Look at these target coordinates. In every case, your actual impact points are within inches of where you aimed. That level of precision is theoretically impossible, even with the best targeting systems." Sarah studied the reports. She had always been proud of her accuracy, but seeing it laid out this way, she had to admit it was unusual. "Maybe I'm just a good pilot. Captain, I've worked with A-10 pilots for over 2 decades. I've seen the best of the best. What you're doing is beyond human capability. It's like you have perfect knowledge of wind conditions, aircraft performance, and target movement before you even fire." Thompson pulled out another document, this one marked with red security classifications. "This is a copy of the investigation report from Captain Morgan's friendly fire incident. The official conclusion was pilot error, but read this section carefully." Sarah read the highlighted paragraph. Subsequent analysis of the aircraft's targeting systems revealed several anomalies in the software logs. The coordinates displayed to the pilot appeared to differ from the coordinates actually programmed into the weapons systems. However, post-incident testing could not reproduce these anomalies, and the discrepancies were attributed to pilot misreading under combat stress. "They covered it up," Sarah said quietly. "That's what I think. Captain Morgan wasn't responsible for those deaths. Something was wrong with the aircraft's systems, but rather than admit there was a defect, they blamed the pilot and retired the aircraft." Thompson opened yet another folder, revealing photographs and technical diagrams. But the aircraft wasn't really retired. Someone secretly brought it back into service, installed experimental equipment, and somehow arranged for you to be assigned to it. Sarah studied the technical diagrams. They showed modifications to the aircraft's avionics bay that she had never seen before. Extra wiring, additional computer processors, and what appeared to be some kind of recording device. What is all this equipment supposed to do? Near as I can figure, it's designed to monitor and potentially influence the pilot's decision-making process. Look at this diagram. See how these new wires run directly to the pilot's headset connection? Someone has been listening to everything you say and hear during your flights. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone had been monitoring her conversations, her thoughts, her reactions during combat. They had been treating her like a test subject in some kind of experiment. But why, she asked. What could they possibly gain from this? Thompson's expression grew even more serious. Captain, I think someone is trying to develop a new kind of weapons system. Something that combines artificial intelligence with human intuition. They used Captain Morgan as the first test subject, but when the experiment went wrong and she killed friendly forces, they needed to cover it up and start over. With me. With you. Think about it, Captain. Your call sign, your resemblance to Captain Morgan, your assignment to this specific aircraft, none of that is coincidence. Someone selected you very carefully. Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. The idea that her entire military career might have been manipulated, that she had been chosen as a test subject for illegal experiments, was almost too much to process. Who would do something like this? Who has the authority to cover up a friendly fire incident and secretly continue experimental weapons development? That's the question I've been trying to answer for 2 years, Thompson said. But I think I'm getting close. Look at this. He pulled out a photograph of several men in suits standing next to an A-10 aircraft. They were clearly civilians, not military personnel, but they had access to restricted areas of the base. This picture was taken 3 weeks before Captain Morgan's incident. I recognized 2 of these men from the investigation team that came to examine her aircraft afterward. They weren't Air Force investigators, they were contractors. Sarah studied the faces in the photograph. They looked like corporate executives, not military personnel. Do you know who they work for? I've been trying to figure that out. But I found something interesting in the base visitor logs from that time period. Thompson showed her a computer printout with names and security badge numbers. Most of these people were cleared through a company called Integrated Defense Solutions. When I researched that company, it turns out to be a subsidiary of a much larger defense contractor. Which one? Meridian Aerospace. They're one of the biggest military contractors in the world. They build everything from fighter jets to missile systems. And, according to their corporate website, they're heavily involved in artificial intelligence research. Sarah felt the pieces starting to come together. A major defense contractor, experimenting with AI-enhanced weapons systems, using military pilots as unwitting test subjects. It was exactly the kind of black project that she had heard rumors about but never believed could really exist. Sergeant Thompson, if this is true, we have to report it. We have to expose what they're doing. Thompson shook his head sadly. Captain, I tried to report it 2 years ago, after Captain Morgan died. I took my concerns to the base commander, to the inspector general, even to a congressional liaison. But every time I tried to present evidence, the case files would disappear or I would be reassigned to different duties. They've been covering this up for 2 years? They've been perfecting it for 2 years. And I think you're the proof that their system works. Your mission record with that aircraft is exactly what they were trying to achieve: perfect precision, zero friendly fire incidents, maximum effectiveness. Sarah stared at the maintenance log spread across the desk. Her entire recent military career, everything she was proud of as a pilot, had been the result of illegal experimentation. She wasn't a naturally gifted pilot, she was the product of artificial enhancement. What about today's mission? Why did they pull me off that CAS mission? Thompson consulted another set of papers. I think they were testing something new. Look at the radio logs I was able to pull from the communications center. The voice that called in those F-16s? It wasn't from our normal air traffic control. The signal came from off-base. Someone outside our command structure ordered me to stand down? Someone with enough authority to override our local controllers, yes. And, look at this, the same signal also contained data transmissions to your aircraft's avionics systems. Someone was remotely accessing your targeting computer during that mission. Sarah felt a surge of anger. Not only had they been experimenting on her, but they had been actively interfering with her ability to help troops in combat. American soldiers had been in danger, and these corporate scientists had treated it as a test scenario. I want to see my aircraft again, she said. I want to examine these modifications myself. That's not possible right now, Captain.
After today's incident, your aircraft has been moved to a secure hangar.
Only personnel with special authorization can access it.
Then, we need to get that authorization. Thompson looked at her seriously. Captain, you need to understand what you're getting into. If we pursue this investigation, we'll be going up against some very powerful people.
People who have already killed one pilot and covered it up. Captain Morgan committed suicide.
You said so yourself. Did she? Or was she eliminated because she was about to expose the program? Thompson pulled out one final document.
This is Captain Morgan's psychiatric evaluation from the week before her death. According to the base psychiatrist, she was showing signs of recovery. She was starting to accept that the friendly fire incident wasn't entirely her fault. She was asking questions about her aircraft's maintenance records. Sarah stared at the evaluation report. If Captain Morgan had been starting to uncover the truth about the experimental program, someone might have decided she was too dangerous to leave alive. Sergeant, if we're right about this, then we're both in danger just for having this conversation.
I know. But I can't live with keeping quiet anymore.
For soldiers died because of this program, and if we don't stop it, more people are going to die. Sarah made her decision.
What do you need me to do?
Thompson smiled for the first time since their conversation began.
I need you to fly one more mission in that aircraft. But, this time, we're going to be monitoring everything.
I've prepared some special equipment that will record all the data transmissions to and from your aircraft. If we can prove that someone is remotely controlling your targeting systems, we'll have evidence that can't be covered up.
When?
Tomorrow. I've arranged for you to be assigned a routine patrol mission.
Nothing dangerous, just a standard reconnaissance flight.
But, during that flight, we'll gather all the proof we need to expose this program. Sarah looked around the dark hangar, at the maintenance logs and classified documents scattered across the desk. She was about to commit herself to a course of action that could end her career or worse. But, she thought about Captain Morgan, about the 4 soldiers who had died, about all the pilots who might become unwitting test subjects in the future.
All right, she said. Let's do it.
Thompson began gathering up the documents and returning them to their folders.
Captain, there's one more thing you need to know. If I'm right about what's been happening, then tomorrow's flight is going to be very dangerous.
They're going to know that we're onto them, and they might try to silence us the same way they silenced Captain Morgan. Sarah felt a chill, but her resolve didn't waver. Then, we better make sure we get solid evidence before they have a chance to stop us. As they prepared to leave the hangar, Thompson handed her a small electronic device.
This is a data recorder. Keep it with you during tomorrow's flight.
If something happens to me, this will contain copies of everything we've discovered. Sarah slipped the device into her pocket.
Nothing's going to happen to you, Sergeant.
We're going to expose this program and make sure those responsible are held accountable. But, even as she said the words, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. Tomorrow's mission would either prove their theories or get them both killed.
Sarah barely slept that night.
Every time she closed her eyes, she saw images of Captain Morgan, the mysterious tail number, and the faces of the corporate executives in Thompson's photograph. When her alarm went off at 0500, she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and running through the plan for the day's mission.
The morning briefing was routine.
A standard reconnaissance patrol over a quiet sector, nothing that should involve combat or complex targeting. Perfect for Thompson's plan to monitor the aircraft's systems without putting anyone in danger. Sarah listened to the weather briefing and mission parameters while her mind focused on the hidden recording devices Thompson had promised to install during the night. After the briefing, Sarah walked out to the flight line where her aircraft was parked. The A-10 looked exactly the same as always, but now she found herself studying every detail with suspicious eyes.
Were there new antennas hidden among the existing equipment? Had someone been working on the aircraft during the night?
Thompson was waiting for her with his usual pre-flight checklist, but his manner was subtly different.
More tense, more watchful.
He kept glancing around the flight line as if expecting trouble.
Everything ready, Sergeant? She asked quietly.
Recording devices are installed and active, he replied in a low voice. Whatever happens during this flight, we'll have a complete record of all communications and data transmissions. Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection with extra care, checking every access panel and maintenance point. She wanted to be absolutely certain that the aircraft was safe to fly, especially if someone might be trying to sabotage her mission. As she climbed into the cockpit, Thompson handed her a small earpiece.
This is connected directly to my monitoring station. If I detect anything unusual, I'll be able to communicate with you on a secure channel.
Sarah fitted the earpiece under her helmet and ran through her normal startup procedures. The engine spooled up normally, all systems showed green, and her radio checks were clear. From all external appearances, it was going to be a routine mission. But, as she taxied toward the runway, Sarah noticed something that made her heart rate spike.
A black sedan with government license plates was parked near the base operations building.
2 men in suits were standing beside it, watching her aircraft with obvious interest. "Thompson, do you see the sedan by base ops?" she said into the secure communicator.
I see it. Those are the same men from the photograph. They know we're onto them. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline.
The investigation had moved beyond covert observation. Someone had decided to take direct action, and Sarah was about to become the focal point of a very dangerous game. "Should I abort the mission?" she asked.
Negative.
"If you abort now, they'll know for certain that we're investigating them. Continue with the mission, but be ready for anything." Sarah took off and headed toward her assigned patrol area, constantly monitoring her instruments for any signs of tampering.
For the first 30 minutes of the flight, everything appeared normal.
Her targeting systems were functioning properly, her communications were clear, and the aircraft was responding exactly as expected. But then, as she flew over a particularly remote section of desert, something changed. Her targeting display flickered briefly, showing coordinates that were completely different from her current location. When the display stabilized, the false coordinates disappeared, but Sarah had seen enough. "Thompson, my targeting system just displayed false coordinates," she reported over the secure channel.
I saw it on my monitors. Someone just attempted to remotely access your weapons systems.
The attempt was blocked by the monitoring equipment, but they're definitely trying to take control. Sarah felt a chill of fear. If someone could remotely control her targeting systems, they could force her to attack friendly forces just like they had done to Captain Morgan. She was flying a weapon that could be turned against her own people at any moment.
What do you want me to do?
Continue the mission, but prepare for emergency shutdown of all targeting systems if I give the word.
I'm recording everything they're trying to do to your aircraft.
As Sarah continued her patrol, the attempts to access her systems became more frequent and more sophisticated. Her navigation display would flicker with false headings, her communication radio would briefly tune to different frequencies, and her weapons systems would show target locks on empty desert. But Thompson's recording equipment was capturing every intrusion attempt, building a case that would be impossible to deny or cover up.
For the first time since discovering the conspiracy, Sarah felt hopeful that they might actually be able to expose the truth.
Then, her main radio crackled to life with a familiar voice.
"Surgeon, this is Overlord.
You are directed to immediately proceed to grid coordinates 41 SMD 98765432110 for urgent close air support mission."
Sarah recognized the voice. It was the same formal, distant tone that had ordered her off yesterday's mission.
But the coordinates they were giving her were in a completely different area from her assigned patrol zone. "Thompson, are you hearing this?" she said into the secure communicator. "I'm hearing it, and I'm also detecting massive data transmissions to your aircraft.
Someone is trying to override your flight controls."
Sarah could feel the aircraft trying to turn toward the coordinates she had been given, even though she was not applying any control inputs. The fly-by-wire systems were being remotely controlled, trying to force her to fly to a location she had not chosen.
"Overlord, Surgeon is on assigned patrol."
"I have not been briefed for any CAS mission," she replied over the radio, while fighting to maintain control of her aircraft. "Surgeon, this is direct from Theater Command. American forces are under heavy attack and require immediate assistance.
Proceed to coordinates immediately." Sarah knew it was a lie. Thompson's monitoring station would have picked up any legitimate emergency communications.
This was an attempt to lure her into some kind of trap. "I'm not going," she said over the secure channel.
"Whatever they're planning for those coordinates, I'm not going to be part of it."
"Captain, look at your weapons display." Thompson's voice was tight with alarm. Sarah looked down at her weapons control panel and felt her blood freeze. The system was showing that her 30mm cannon was armed and ready to fire, even though she had not selected any weapons. Worse, the targeting system was locked onto a position on the ground that showed as friendly forces. Someone was trying to force her to commit friendly fire. Thompson, they're trying to make me repeat Captain Morgan's incident. They're going to use me to kill American soldiers. Shut down all weapon systems immediately. Use the emergency cutoff switch. Sarah reached for the master weapons cutoff, but when she threw the switch, nothing happened. The weapons remained armed, and the targeting system continued to track the friendly position on the ground. The cutoff isn't working. They've overridden the safety systems. Sarah realized with growing horror that she was trapped in exactly the same situation that had faced Captain Morgan 2 years earlier. Someone was using her aircraft as a weapon against her own people, and she was powerless to stop it. But then, she remembered something Thompson had told her about the modifications to her aircraft. If the experimental systems were monitoring her thoughts and reactions, then maybe she could use that against them. Instead of trying to fight the control systems, Sarah began to think very deliberately about specific actions. She visualized herself firing at the false target, but then deliberately aimed at a different point. She imagined following the false coordinates, but planned a flight path to a completely different location. The strategy worked. The aircraft's control systems, trying to interpret her intentions through the neural interface, became confused by the conflicting signals. Sarah was able to regain partial control of her flight path and weapons systems. Thompson, I think I figured out how to confuse their control systems. But I need to land immediately. This aircraft is too dangerous to keep flying. Negative, Captain. Look at your fuel gauge. Sarah checked her fuel indicators and saw the impossible. According to the gauges, she had less than 10 minutes of fuel remaining. But she had taken off with full tanks less than an hour ago. Someone had been manipulating her fuel readings as well, trying to force her to land at a location of their choosing. My fuel gauges are showing empty, but that's impossible. It's another false reading. Your actual fuel status is normal. But, Captain, you need to see this. I'm detecting multiple aircraft converging on your position. Sarah looked at her radar display and saw 4 contacts approaching from different directions. According to the identification system, they were F-16s with friendly transponders. But, after everything that had happened, Sarah no longer trusted any of her instruments. Are those really friendly aircraft? I don't think so. The transponder signals are being generated electronically, not by actual aircraft. Someone is trying to make you think you're surrounded by friendlies so you won't take evasive action. Sarah made her decision. Whatever was happening, whoever was controlling her aircraft, she was not going to be used as a weapon against innocent people. She began executing a series of aggressive maneuvers designed to stress the aircraft's systems and potentially break the remote control connection. The plan worked. As she pulled the aircraft through high G-turns and rapid altitude changes, the attempts to control her systems became more erratic and less effective. The false radar contacts disappeared, the weapons systems finally responded to her cutoff commands, and the targeting display returned to normal. Captain, you've broken their control link. But you need to get back to base immediately. I'm detecting vehicles approaching your aircraft's parking location. Sarah turned toward home base, flying as fast as the A-10 could manage. She could see smoke rising from the direction of the airfield, and her radio was filled with confused chatter about some kind of incident in the maintenance areas. When she landed and taxied to the flight line, Sarah could see the aftermath of what appeared to be a coordinated attack on the base's investigation capabilities. The hangar where Thompson had shown her the evidence was burning, and several maintenance vehicles had been destroyed. Thompson was waiting for her as she shut down her engines, but he looked shaken and worried. What happened here? She asked as she climbed out of the cockpit. They tried to destroy all the evidence, he replied. But they were too late. The recording devices captured everything that happened during your flight. We have proof of remote control attempts, weapons system overrides, and false communications. We have enough evidence to bring down the entire program. But, even as Thompson spoke, Sarah could see the black sedans approaching across the tarmac. The men in suits were coming to clean up the situation, just as they had 2 years earlier with Captain Morgan. Sergeant, we need to get this evidence to someone outside the base immediately. If they capture us, we'll end up like Captain Morgan. Thompson handed her a briefcase containing copies of all their evidence. There's a congressman who's been investigating defense contractor corruption. His contact information is in the briefcase. If something happens to me, get this to him." The sedans had reached their location, and armed men were stepping out. But Sarah was no longer afraid. She had the truth, and she was going to make sure it reached people who could act on it. "Sergeant Thompson," she said loudly enough for the approaching men to hear, "thank you for showing me how to be a real pilot instead of just a remote-controlled weapon." The lead man in the suit started to speak, but Sarah cut him off. "Gentlemen, I believe you're looking for this." She held up the briefcase containing the evidence. "Unfortunately for you, copies have already been transmitted to congressional oversight committees and investigative journalists. Your program is finished." For the first time in 2 days, Sarah Chen felt like she was in complete control of her own destiny. The truth about Captain Morgan's death, about the illegal experimentation program, about the corporate conspiracy to turn military pilots into unwitting test subjects, all of it was about to become public. As the men in suits retreated to their vehicles and sped away from the base, Sarah looked back at the A-10 with tail number 75-0289. It was just an aircraft again, no longer haunted by tragedy or corrupted by secret experiments. Captain Lisa Morgan could finally rest in peace, knowing that her death had not been in vain and that no other pilot would be used as an unwitting weapon against their own people. Sarah Chen had found her voice, and she was going to use it to make sure the truth was never buried again.